In the heart of the jagged peaks, a mountain range where the tallest summits claw at the skies like ancient stone sentinels, a secret had been whispered for generations. The mountain winds carried tales of a hidden cave, nestled high in the cliffs, where time and magic wove together. Few believed these stories, dismissing them as the ramblings of wandering travelers. Yet, among those who sought knowledge of the old world, it was well known that not all legends were born from nothing. The jagged peaks were treacherous, home to blizzards that could strip flesh from bone and craggy paths that could send the most experienced climber plummeting into the abyss. But somewhere above the clouds, above even the bravest of adventurers, lay the fabled cave of crystalline wonders, known only to a handful of sages by its name, Eleuthera. Eleuthera was more than just a cave, it was said to hold a lake as clear as the finest glass, reflecting not just the stars and sky but the very essence of magic itself. Surrounding the lake were clusters of crystals, shimmering with hues from every corner of the spectrum, their soft glow giving the cavern an otherworldly beauty. In the deepest part of the cave stood an arch, ancient and adorned with forgotten runes, a portal to realms beyond understanding. But it was not just the perilous climb that made the cave inaccessible, no, the true gatekeeper was the being who called these heights her home. Zyra, the emerald dragoness, was the guardian of Eleuthera. Her lair was close by, in a hollow carved into the face of the mountain, overlooking the cave like a watchful sentinel. Zyra was a creature of elegance and power, her scales a brilliant green that shimmered like emeralds under the sunlight, and her eyes, deep and golden, held the weight of ages. She was no ordinary dragon. For centuries, she had watched over Eleuthera, ensuring that only those worthy enough would ever step through the portal it guarded. Though fierce and mighty, Zyra was not a creature of cruelty. She was charming, with a voice that could melt the coldest heart, her wisdom sharp and tempered by millennia of experience. Many had sought her out, believing they could bargain, deceive, or overpower her to gain access to the portal's secrets. But none had succeeded. Some left with their pride wounded and nothing more, while others were never seen again, their fate known only to the mountain winds. Zyra allowed few to enter the cave, and fewer still to approach the ancient archway. Only those with pure intentions, or those with a purpose that transcended their own desires, were granted permission. The tale begins one fateful day when a young scholar named Kyle arrived at the base of the jagged peaks. Kyle was not a warrior, nor was he a seasoned adventurer. He was a seeker of truths, a man whose life had been devoted to unraveling the mysteries of the world. His studies had led him to the jagged peaks and to the legend of Eleuthera, for he had discovered something many had overlooked, a fragment of a forgotten prophecy. The gate shall open when wisdom meets courage, and the guardian yields to the heart of the pure. He knew at once this prophecy referred to the cave and its elusive portal. Determined to uncover the truth, Kyle set out on the arduous journey up the mountains. Days passed, and the climb tested every ounce of his endurance. The winds howled like the roars of forgotten beasts, and the cold was biting. Yet, Kyle pressed on, driven by a deep need to understand what lay beyond the arch. At last, after a journey that seemed endless, Kyle reached the entrance to Eleuthera. The sight took his breath away. The vast lake stretched out before him, so clear that he could see the glimmering crystals at its depths. The walls of the cave were studded with luminous stones that cast a soft, ethereal glow, bathing the entire chamber in a kaleidoscope of colors. And there, at the far end, stood the arch, ancient, weathered, and yet filled with the pulse of dormant power. But before Kyle could take a step further, a shadow passed over him, followed by a soft gust of wind that stirred the air in the cave. He turned to see her. Zyra, the green dragoness, descended gracefully, her wings folding against her sides as her massive form touched the stone floor. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity as she regarded the lone human before her. "Many have come before you," she said, her voice rich and smooth, like velvet draped over iron. "But few stand where you stand now. What brings you to Elithera, little scholar?" Kyle swallowed hard, but he did not falter. He knew this was the moment the prophecy spoke of, the meeting between wisdom and courage. "I seek the truth, great Zyra," he replied, his voice steady though his heart raced. "Not for power, nor for fame. I wish to understand the portal's purpose. It is said that beyond this arch lies knowledge beyond our world. I believe this knowledge could help my people, and perhaps all people, if it is understood properly." Zyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. "Many have claimed such noble reasons. Most are blinded by their ambitions." Kyle shook his head. "I do not seek it for myself. I seek it for the future, for the generations yet to come. Knowledge is not a weapon to be wielded, but a gift to be shared." The dragoness was silent for a long moment. Then, she tilted her head, a soft smile curling her lips. "You are either a fool, or you are wise beyond your years. But the portal does not open for just words, no matter how sincere." Zyra moved closer, her presence overwhelming. "Tell me, Kyle, what will you do if what lies beyond is not the answer you seek, but something darker? Something that cannot be controlled or understood?" Kyle met her gaze. "Then I will close the portal forever, so that it may never be used to harm. I would rather return empty-handed than bring danger to the world." For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind echoing through the cave. Then, Zyra's deep laughter filled the cavern, a sound that was both terrifying and strangely melodic. "You are indeed brave, little scholar," she said, stepping back. "Perhaps the prophecy speaks of you after all." With a flick of her tail, Zyra gestured toward the arch. The crystals around the lake began to pulse with light, and the runes upon the ancient stone shimmered to life. Slowly, a shimmering portal appeared within the arch, its surface like liquid silver, swirling and glowing with untapped power. "The gate is open," Zyra said. "Go, if you dare. But remember, Kyle, not all knowledge is meant to be known. Choose wisely what you take from the other side." With a deep breath, Kyle nodded and stepped through the portal. What lay beyond was not what he expected. Kyle found himself in a realm of endless twilight, where the sky glowed with the light of 1,000 stars, and strange floating islands hovered in the air, connected by bridges of light. Here, time flowed differently, and the very air hummed with magic. At the heart of this strange world, Kyle saw a vast library, an ancient repository of knowledge that stretched beyond the horizon. This was what the portal guarded, not a weapon, not a tool of destruction, but a place where the knowledge of countless worlds was kept. As he approached the library, Kyle understood why the prophecy had spoken of courage and wisdom. This place was both a treasure and a danger. To take from it recklessly could unravel the very fabric of reality. He spent what felt like days, though it could have been mere moments in his world, studying, learning, and absorbing all he could. And when the time came, he left with only the knowledge he knew would help his people, leaving the rest untouched, knowing some things were not meant to be disturbed. When he returned to Elithera, Zyra was waiting. "You chose wisely," she said, a note of approval in her voice. "Few have the strength to resist the temptation of such power." Kyle smiled, exhausted but content. "The portal holds more than I could have imagined. Thank you for trusting me." Zyra inclined her head. "The portal will remain here, for those like you who come with true purpose. But beware, if ever the wrong soul seeks it, I will ensure they never leave these mountains." With that, the portal shimmered and closed, its secrets once again hidden from the world. And so, Kyle returned to his people, carrying with him the knowledge that would shape the future. But he never spoke of Illithera, nor of the dragoness who guarded its portal. Some things, he knew, were best left to legend. Years passed, and Kyle's journey to Illithera faded into memory, becoming a part of the lore shared among scholars and sages. Though he had returned with the knowledge he sought, he never revealed the true nature of the portal or spoke of the green dragoness who guarded it. Instead, he focused on using what he had learned to better the world around him. The knowledge he brought back spurred advancements in agriculture, medicine, and the healing arts, subtly influencing the course of history. But the deeper secrets of the portal remained sealed in his heart, known only to him and Zyra. Yet, as with all secrets, time has a way of stirring the winds of curiosity. Long after Kyle had grown old and his name became a legend, another force began to take notice of the ancient magic slumbering in the jagged peaks. Darker whispers began circulating through the hidden corners of the world, whispers of a power untouched for centuries, a gateway to untold realms. And as the shadows lengthened across the lands, so did the ambitions of those who sought to claim it. In the southern lands, where the kingdoms sprawled across fertile valleys and great rivers, there rose a powerful warlord named Draven. Unlike Kyle, Draven was no scholar or seeker of wisdom, he was a man of action, driven by a hunger for conquest and dominance. His rise to power had been swift and brutal, fueled by an army of ruthless mercenaries and dark sorceries whispered to him by unseen advisors. Draven had conquered 3 neighboring kingdoms in less than a decade, his armies leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. One night, as Draven sat in his great hall, surrounded by the spoils of his latest conquest, a figure approached him, a figure cloaked in shadow, its face hidden behind a hood. The hall grew unnaturally silent as the figure whispered into Draven's ear, its voice like cold steel scraping over stone. "There is a place, high in the jagged peaks. A portal that leads to realms of unimaginable power. Power enough to make you more than a mere king. Power enough to make you a god." Draven, ever the opportunist, listened intently. The promise of such power stirred something deep within him, a dark yearning that had grown ever stronger as his empire expanded. But the figure warned him of the dragon that guarded the cave, a creature whose strength rivaled that of the gods themselves. "If you seek the portal, you will need more than an army. You will need a weapon forged from the blood of ancient beings, a blade that can pierce the scales of even the mightiest dragon." And so, Draven sent his agents across the world, scouring ancient tombs and forgotten cities for such a weapon. It was not long before they returned, carrying with them an obsidian blade, black as midnight, said to have been forged in the fires of the underworld by a fallen god. The blade pulsed with dark magic, hungering for the blood of powerful beings. With the blade in hand and his ambitions stoked to a fever pitch, Draven set out for the jagged peaks. His army, a tide of armored warriors and sorcerers, marched in his wake. The journey was perilous, for the mountains were unforgiving, but Draven's will was unyielding. After weeks of travel, they arrived at the base of the towering peaks, where the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls. The soldiers hesitated, sensing the danger that loomed ahead, but Draven pressed on, his eyes fixed on the heights above. Zyra, the green dragoness, sensed the disturbance long before Draven's forces reached the cave. The winds carried whispers of steel and sorcery, of greed and bloodlust. From her lair, she watched the army approach, her golden eyes narrowing. It had been many years since she had faced a threat, but she was not unprepared. The magic that bound her to Elithera had long warned her of moments like this. High in the cave of Elithera, the crystals surrounding the lake began to hum softly, reacting to the rising tension. The portal, dormant and silent for so long, stirred faintly as if sensing the coming storm. Zyra knew she could not allow Draven or his forces to access its power. The knowledge held beyond that archway was too dangerous for mortal hands, especially for one as driven by hunger as Draven. The sun set as Draven's army camped at the base of the peaks, and in the twilight hours, he made his move. Draven did not climb with the bulk of his army, he took only a handful of his most trusted warriors and sorcerers, each skilled in their respective arts. The climb was grueling, but Draven's thirst for power kept him going, his eyes gleaming in the dim moonlight. His hand never left the hilt of the obsidian blade, feeling its dark energy pulse with each step closer to the cave. Finally, they reached the entrance of Elithera. Zyra was waiting. She descended from the cliffs above with terrifying grace, her massive wings unfurling to block the stars. Her emerald scales gleamed in the moonlight, and her presence alone sent a shiver through the air. Draven's men faltered, but he stepped forward, his gaze meeting hers with cold determination. "So," Zyra said, her voice deep and resonant, echoing off the cave walls. "You are the one who seeks the portal's power. I have felt your kind before, arrogant, hungry. Tell me, warlord, why should I let you pass?" Draven unsheathed the obsidian blade, its edge glinting ominously in the dim light. "I do not ask for your permission, dragon. I have come to claim what is mine. Stand aside, or be slain." Zyra's lips curled into a smile, half amusement, half disdain. "You think you can kill me with that? Many have tried to take what I guard. All have failed." Without another word, Draven lunged, the obsidian blade cutting through the air with a whisper of death. His sorcerers unleashed torrents of dark magic, weaving spells meant to bind and weaken the dragoness. But Zyra was no ordinary foe. With a powerful beat of her wings, she unleashed a gust of wind that sent Draven's warriors tumbling back. Her claws slashed through the air, deflecting spells with ease as her tail swept across the stone, scattering Draven's forces like leaves in a storm. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Draven fought with a fury born of desperation, but no matter how many blows he landed, the dragoness seemed to grow stronger, more focused. The obsidian blade, for all its dark magic, barely scratched her scales. Zyra's fire, green and brilliant, scorched the very earth, reducing Draven's sorcerers to ash. And then, with a swift, decisive strike, Zyra knocked the blade from Draven's hand, sending it clattering across the stone floor. She pinned him beneath her massive claw, her golden eyes narrowing to slits. "You are not worthy of the knowledge beyond this portal," she hissed, her voice filled with ancient wrath. "I could end you here, and no one would mourn your loss." But before she could deliver the final blow, something strange happened. The portal, which had been dormant and still, began to pulse with light once again. Zyra's eyes flicked toward it, and in that moment, Draven saw his chance. He reached out, not for the blade, but for a vial of blood, dragon's blood, stolen from ancient tombs, potent with magic. He hurled it at the portal. The moment the blood touched the portal, a terrible screech echoed through the cave. The portal flared to life, swirling violently as it began to open. A great, dark force spilled forth, something far older and more dangerous than Zyra or Draven had anticipated. The ground trembled, and the air grew thick with malevolent energy. Zyra's eyes widened in horror. "You fool! You've awakened something beyond our control." But Draven, weakened and delirious, only laughed. Power, endless power. The dark force surged forth from the portal, twisting and writhing, a shadow with no shape, consuming everything in its path. Zyra released Draven, her mind racing. She had to close the portal before the entity fully emerged, before it consumed the world itself. In a desperate move, Zyra summoned all her strength and magic, focusing it on the portal. The crystals around the lake began to glow fiercely, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. But the force was stronger than anything she had ever faced. It fought against her, its hunger insatiable. Draven, still cackling, was the first to be consumed by the shadow, his laughter turning to screams as he was pulled into the void. Zyra, straining under the weight of the portal's power, knew that she could not hold it back alone. She let out a deafening roar, a call for help that echoed through the mountains, reaching farther than even she knew. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? As Zyra roared, her voice reverberated through the jagged peaks, carried by winds that had witnessed countless eras. The mountains themselves seemed to tremble as her call of desperation echoed across their jagged spires, a cry for aid that transcended time and space. But as the portal's dark force continued to surge into the cave, a twisted, formless shadow creeping over the ground like spilled ink, Zyra knew she was running out of time. Her once indomitable strength was being sapped by the power of the dark entity that threatened to break free from its ancient prison. The crystals around the lake flickered erratically, struggling to contain the growing chaos. The force was unlike anything she had ever encountered in her centuries as guardian of Illithera. It was not simply magic, it was pure malevolence, an ancient hunger that had long been sealed away in the void. It had no form, no face, but its presence pressed down on the world like a suffocating weight, consuming light, air, and hope. Draven had unleashed something far beyond his understanding, and his arrogance had already cost him his life, his body swallowed by the darkness that now poured forth from the portal. Zyra's body trembled as she channeled every ounce of her magic into the portal, trying to force it closed, but the entity resisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. Her wings beat furiously, stirring the air within the cave into a maelstrom of wind and light. Still, it wasn't enough. The power was too great, and she could feel the weight of it pressing against her mind, trying to break her will. But she was not alone. From the far reaches of the mountains, a response came to her call. The ground shook, and the sky darkened with the beating of wings. Emerging from the distant peaks came figures of myth, other dragons, creatures of legend who had lived in isolation for centuries. These ancient beings had long kept to their distant realms, but Zyra's cry for help had reached them, stirring them from their slumber. Dragons of every hue, gold, sapphire, amethyst, and ruby, descended from the clouds, their massive forms cutting through the air like living storms. At their head was Pyros, an ancient red dragon whose fiery temper was matched only by his loyalty to the old ways. His scales shimmered like molten lava, and his eyes burned with the light of 1,000 suns. With him came Aurelia, a sleek and graceful golden dragoness whose wisdom had guided the dragonkind for millennia. Their arrival was swift and fierce, and the sight of them filled Zyra with renewed hope. Zyra! Pyros roared as he landed beside her, his wings sending a gust of hot wind through the cave. What have you unleashed here? Zyra, her breath laboured, nodded toward the swirling chaos of the portal. It wasn't me. A mortal, a fool, he sought to claim the power of the portal and has awoken something far worse. We must seal it before it spreads. Aurelia approached the portal, her eyes narrowing as she observed the dark entity writhing within. This is no ordinary magic, she said softly, her voice like the chime of golden bells. This is an ancient force, older than even our kind. It seeks to consume, to devour. If it is not stopped, it will spread beyond this realm, into every world connected to the portal. Zyra nodded grimly. I cannot hold it much longer. I've been trying to close the portal, but the force is too strong. If we don't act quickly, it will consume everything. Pyros bared his teeth in a snarl. Then we fight. Together. Without hesitation, the dragons took their places around the portal. Pyros unleashed a torrent of fire, his flames burning with the heat of 1,000 suns, while Aurelia called upon the ancient magics of the earth, summoning glowing sigils that danced in the air around the portal. The other dragons, each powerful in their own right, added their strength, breathing ice, lightning, and arcane energy into the swirling void. The cave became a battleground of elemental forces, the air thick with the clash of dragon fire and the malevolent power of the portal. The dark entity within the portal roared in defiance, its form shifting and growing as it lashed out at the dragons. Tendrils of shadow reached out, seeking to entangle and drain their strength, but the dragons fought back, their combined might forming a barrier against the entity's advance. Still, for all their power, it was not enough. The darkness continued to grow, pushing against their magic with relentless force. Zyra, her body aching and her magic nearly spent, knew they needed more than brute strength. The portal wasn't just a doorway, it was a balance, a conduit between worlds. Closing it required more than just sealing the rift, it required an understanding of the magic that bound it. She looked toward the ancient arch, its runes glowing faintly beneath the onslaught of power, and realized that there was only one way to stop the entity. The portal responds to intention, she whispered to herself. It opens and closes for those who understand its purpose. She turned to Aurelia. The portal's magic is tied to those who guard it. I have been its guardian for centuries, but the power within is too great for me alone. It needs more than strength, it needs harmony. Aurelia's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You mean, a pact? Between all of us? Zyra nodded. We must bind ourselves to the portal, just as I have been bound. Only then can we control its magic and force it closed. The other dragons hesitated. To bind themselves to the portal meant surrendering a part of their essence, their freedom, to its magic. It was a sacrifice, one that would tether them to Elithera for eternity. Pyros growled. And if we do not succeed? Then the darkness will consume us all, Zyra said, her voice resolute. This is our only chance. Aurelia stepped forward without hesitation, her golden eyes shining with determination. I will stand with you, Zyra. For the Sake of all realms, we will close this portal together. One by one, the other dragons joined, forming a circle around the arch. They lowered their heads, their eyes glowing with the light of ancient magic as they began to chant in the language of the dragons, a language older than the mountains themselves. The runes on the arch flared to life, and the crystals around the lake pulsed in rhythm with their words. Zyra, standing at the heart of the circle, channeled her remaining strength into the portal. The dark entity writhed and screamed, sensing that its escape was being cut off, but it was too late. The combined magic of the dragons surged through the arch, filling the portal with radiant light. The shadows within twisted and shrieked, but they could not resist the power of the ancient pact. Slowly, the portal began to close. The swirling darkness was drawn back into the void, and the tendrils of shadow retreated, shrinking as the gateway to the other realm sealed itself shut. With a final, deafening roar, the dark entity was pulled back into the depths from which it had come, and the portal closed with a blinding flash of light. Silence fell over the cave. The crystals around the lake dimmed, returning to their gentle glow. The air was still, and the oppressive weight of the dark magic was gone. Zyra, exhausted but victorious, collapsed onto the stone floor, her wings folding limply at her sides. The other dragons, too, were weakened, their bodies trembling from the effort. But the portal was sealed, and the darkness was gone. Aurelia approached Zyra, her golden eyes soft with understanding. "It is done. We are bound to Elithera now. Guardians, together." Zyra smiled weakly. It was the only way. Pyro snorted, his usual fiery temper subdued by exhaustion. "I suppose there are worse places to be bound." The dragons, now bound by their pact, would remain the guardians of the portal, ensuring that no force, mortal or otherwise, would ever threaten the realms again. Their sacrifice had saved the world from a darkness that could have consumed it, and though they were bound to Elithera, they knew their duty was far from over. As the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, the dragons took their places around the cave, standing watch over the portal they had sworn to protect. And for the first time in centuries, Zyra did not stand alone. Together, they would guard Elithera for all eternity, protecting its secrets from those who would seek to misuse them and ensuring that the dark force that had once threatened the world would never escape again. And so, the legend of the Jagged Peaks lived on, a story of sacrifice, power, and the eternal vigilance of the dragons who watched over the ancient portal, keeping the balance between worlds safe from harm.